Here we are at another lesson of After Today, the Prophecy of Tomorrow. We've been talking about the Antichrist. Who is he? What kind of things do we need to look for? How will we know he's here? Well, the Bible has a whole chapter dedicated to this individual, and it's in Revelation chapter 13. Let's take a look. We'll jump right in and see what's happening in chapter 13. Chapter 13 is divided into three parts. Talks about the beast or the Antichrist political system in verse 1 through 10, talks about his religious system in verse 11 through 15, and then it talks about his economic system in verses 16 through 18. So let's just start with verse 1. It says, I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head is the name of blasphemy. Well, the sea many times in the book of the Revelation and a lot of parts of the Bible refers to peoples. Matter of fact, Revelation 17:15 specifically says the sea is people. So he's going to come out from a sea of people, out of the world, and he's going to ride upon, he's got 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, we saw before in the last lesson that he's going to bring about a 10-nation entity that he's going to ride into prominence with. And so that's the 10 horns. The 7 heads, it could be the 7 one-world dictatorships of the world. It could be 7 kingdoms, 7 mountains. We're not really sure. But, he's definitely going to be riding and coming in and being in power, ultimate power. It says he's going to have all power to do whatever he wants. Verse 2, it says, the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear. His mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon, or Satan, gave him his power and seat and great authority. So we've already talked about the fact that he's going to have a distinctive look. He's going to come in with a 10-nation entity. He's going to come and capture the kingdom with flatteries. And he's going to be a signer of a 7-year peace treaty. That they're already working on things right now with the Abrahamic Accords. So he's going to basically do whatever he wants. And verse 3 says, I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. I believe this is talking about some sort of an assassination. I believe he's going to be assassinated, and he's going to come back to life. He mimics everything Christ does, and Christ came back from the dead. Well, he's going to have to mimic that same thing. And this is one of the things that people are going to wonder about him, because he's going to, be resurrected from the dead. It says in 17:8 of Revelation talks about this. It talks about how he was, how he is not, and how he is. And this is another indication that he was, meaning he was alive. He was not assassinated, and yet is. He rose from the dead. That's another indication I think he will be assassinated. Going on to the next verse 4, it says, they worshiped the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? Well, this is the kind of terminology you saw in the Old Testament. In Exodus and Psalms, it says, when Israel was talking about God, they said, who is like unto thee, O God? And this is the same kind of verbiage they're using for this beast, this world leader. They're all going to worship him because of, what he does. He's going to be assassinated. He's going to be raised from the dead. He's going to be able to bring down fire from heaven. I believe he's going to go into the new rebuilt temple that's not here yet. And the Jews are going to start their sacrifice again. He's going to stop that, go into the temple, and say, look, I'm your God. I was just risen from the dead. I'm going to bring fire down from heaven and take your sacrifice that you weren't seeing before. So he's going to do some things that the whole world's going to see, and the whole world is going to be in awe of. It says in verse 5, there was given him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power is given unto him to continue 42 months. So his reign on the earth will be 42 months. He's going to do a lot of great things up until this point. After that, he's going to have 42 months before he'll be taken out. In verse 6, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. So he's going to be against Christians. It says he's going to make war against the Christians. It says in verse 7, it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given unto him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. He shall have world power. He shall be able to do what he wants. This we saw in Daniel, in several places in Daniel in the previous lessons. And it says, all that dwell upon the earth, in verse 8, shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. This phrase that you see in Revelation frequently is those who dwell upon the earth. It's talking about non-Christians who are earth dwellers, carnal-minded, don't have any spiritual understanding or care to. Whenever you see that terminology, those that dwell upon the earth in Revelation is talking about people that aren't not Christians, they don't have any spiritual foresight, and they don't understand about spiritual things. You see that in several of the verses in the book of Revelation. The masses are followers. I mean, just look what happened with COVID. They told everybody to wear a mask. Everybody wore a mask. I mean, the masses are followers, even though the masks technically, were very inefficient about, keeping COVID away from people. They said wear a mask. People wore a mask. People are followers. The beast says, okay, you're going to take my mark, which we'll see later. People are going to do it because they're followers. Verse 9, if any man have an ear, let him hear. Verse 10, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. There's going to be a lot of saints on the earth during this time. This is their patience. They know he only has 42 months of power. They know that his end, he's going to die himself and be cast into the bottomless pit. So they know he has a very short time on the earth. That's the patience of the saints. That's their understanding that this is only for a short time. It's only for a few months. Verse 11 says, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. Now we're going to reach into the part of the book that talks about his religious system. And his religious system is all about him. He's going to have a false prophet, which is what they're talking about here, that's going to basically point to him in everything he does. This is going to be probably some sort of a world religious leader that's presently on the earth. They're going to, collude and make an agreement, and he's just going to point everything to him. Just like the Holy Spirit points us to Christ, this false prophet will point everybody to the Antichrist. It says he has 2 horns like a lamb, which is indicative of some sort of religion, Christ-like thing. So it's going to be a religious leader. Verse 12, and he exercises all of the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them that dwell therein, there you got that earth dweller things again, to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Again, he's going to point to the first beast and say, look, worship him, he's God. He proved it, worship him. And people will. They'll follow him. Verse 13, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Again, he's going to have supernatural powers. And we described how this would fit perfectly in the scenario of the new built temple, how that he will come in, claim that he can, accept the sacrifice, and he'll prove it by bringing fire down from heaven. In the Old Testament, that's what was a proof that God accepted the Israelite sacrifice. He'd come down with fire and lick up the blood from the altar, or he'd come down and consume the sacrifice. And that was the proof that this is God's work. Back in the Old Testament also, one of the prophets got into an argument with the false prophets one time, and he said, look, he says, let's make a test. God will be the true God that can come down and consume with fire. So they all made sacrifices. And the only sacrifice that was accepted by God and consumed with the fire was that of the Old Testament prophet. And not only did he consume the sacrifice, he also consumed all the false prophets. So this is a proof that God accepts the sacrifice. So we're going to cut it short here. This was part 3 of the series. Who is the Antichrist? What do we look for when he comes? How will we know him? We got one more part coming up, part 4. And we'll look at that shortly, and after today, the prophecy of tomorrow.